Hey everybody, it's Dave Dugdale, learningvideo.com. I'm going to run through a few examples of DaVinci Resolve 16 Studio, so it's the paid version, of their new tool called SpeedWarp. Before I describe what it is, let's go ahead and just show you. So here's an example of me golfing, 180-degree shutter rule at 100% speed, 4K file. And here it is slowed down to 40% because maybe you shot it and you're like, oh, I wish I had shot this for slow motion. But when you try to slow it down, it becomes very jerky. So what do? You add optical flow. And as you can see, it's not looking so good. The club, my hands. But now we're going to add the new tool under it. This is optical flow with speed warp. And as you can see, it got a little better, especially around my hands and the club. So what is this new speed warp? It's basically derived from this new neural engine. What's a neural engine? I don't really know that much about it, but basically about 2 weeks ago, I was watching Tesla's, the electric car company's autonomous day, where they're showing how cars are going to start driving themselves. And how are they doing? They're doing it with video, cameras, which is kind of what we all use. And I think this is where it's all heading. What you just saw in my golfing example, it didn't work very well. And I'm going to show you some examples in the water with swimming, and it doesn't work that well either, but I think it's going to get better. What I want you to do, if you get a chance, go ahead and watch. I'll put a link to it with a timestamp of where to start watching this autonomous driving day from Tesla. And it's really interesting on how they plan on teaching the neural nets basically of how to drive in different situations. Like they'll show you a bicycle and they'll go find a whole bunch of clips from all their different drivers of Teslas of bicycles, and they're like, well, you obviously want to avoid it, but what happens when the bicycle is on the back of somebody's car? That's a totally different thing, and you've got to teach the neural nets, I guess, how to deal with that. Or let's say a bag blows across the street, a plastic bag. Do you tell the car, go ahead and just run over it, or swerve around it, or stop in front of it? That kind of thing. So I think that's where things are kind of heading with the neural nets. I'm going to show you the swimming here in a second, but my thought is this is so new to Blackmagic that they haven't trained it to do anything yet. Or maybe they've trained it to do some very simplistic things, maybe like a guy on a skateboard. Say, if you see a guy on a skateboard, this is what you should do. But I don't think they've trained it enough yet. So let's go ahead and look at a few more examples and you'll see what I'm talking about here. So here's swimming, just diving. This is 100%. And then let's say you think, oh, I wanted to slow it down, but it's very jerky when you slow it down too much. Here's with optical flow. And this one's with optical flow and speed warp. And as you can see, it doesn't really help that much. All right, here's the next example. Just swimming again. There's 40% slowed down. Here's optical flow. Not too great. And here's optical flow with speed warp. Maybe a little bit better. And here I'm going to show you one more example. Here's 100% 4K. It was actually on a gimbal. And like, oh, I wanted to slow that down. So you try to slow it down. You can see it's really choppy. That's not working very well. And this is with optical flow. And with this type of water, you would think water would be more forgiving than some of the other things that have fine detail. Like in that first example I showed with golf and the tree, it had a lot of detail behind it. So here's optical speed warp, and it helps maybe just a little bit. Sometimes it works well and sometimes it doesn't work well. Basically, it's kind of like when when you're using Twixtor or optical flow, you basically knew that if you wanted to get really good results, you have to have a very boring or a non-detailed background. Because if I show you an example here with the golf, you can see that tree behind me has very fine pine needles, and I'm shooting, I think, I forget what the f-stop number is, but I have a very great depth of field. So those pine needles are in focus and there's a lot of detail there. And as my hands pass by those pine needles, it's really hard for the computer or this algorithm, this neural net, to figure out what's behind it. So I think as Blackmagic, if they're going to throw a lot of time at this, similar to what Tesla's doing right now, they're just throwing tons of time trying to figure out how to teach the neural nets, basically. But I don't know if Blackmagic is teaching it at all. One thing about this SpeedWarp tool, it's very GPU intensive. It's one of the slowest, most laborious tasks. It's probably looking ahead a few frames, behind a few frames, like you do with noise reduction. And it's trying to figure out, well, how do I you've stretched this thing out. I have to add frames. How am I going to make that new frame? I got to look before and after. So I'm going to add that new frame here. And what do I do with this, fine detail behind this person? If it's a tree and I've been taught how to deal with pine needles, then I'm going to put the pine needle algorithm and tell it what to do. But if you want the best results for right now, obviously just shoot it against a boring blue sky or a boring background where you have lots of motion, and you're going to get fantastic results that way. But if you're shooting against complex backgrounds, it's not there yet, but my hope is that it will definitely improve in the future. All right, that's pretty much it. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.